Welcome to Ren Behind the Practice. I'm Sophie Campisi. I'm a holistic business strategist and startup expert, and I spend a lot of my time in conversation with practitioners, coaches, and healers about the behind the scenes of their businesses. What I started noticing is that some of the most honest, important conversations about building a practice were happening quietly, one-on-one, behind the scenes, and often in isolation. Most practitioners are incredibly skilled at the work they do with their clients, but very few of us were ever taught or trained in how to build a successful startup business. And suddenly we've been left to figure it out on our own. This podcast exists to bring those conversations forward, the dreams, the uncertainty, the highs and lows, the recalibrations, and the messy middle. My hope is that by normalizing these conversations, we can soften the stigma, feel less alone, and start closing the gaps together. Today's guest is Dr. Tamar Shtrambrand. Dr. Shtrambrand is a clinical psychologist and solopreneur with her own private practice. She is a mom of 3 and married for 20 years. Dr. Shtrambrand, it is great to have you here. Thank you so much for showing up and having this conversation with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Before we look behind the scenes, can you share with us a little bit more about the work that you do?
Sure. I'm a clinical psychologist. I have my own practice. I actually built it alongside a 9 to 5 that I had working in a psychiatric hospital in my area. And I went full time with it last April of not this year, but the year before, because things at the hospital were just getting too heavy and difficult, as psychiatric hospitals can be. And it wasn't because of the patients. So basically, I already had some experience in working with getting referral sources through word of mouth or looking up referral sources online and getting clients that way. And basically, I just continued to work on that and build on that as I started the practice full time. And then I also, in the last few months, added another side to my business. I started independent contracting with a company in the city called Autism Care Partners Incorporated. And they taught me how to do autism evaluations, which was something that was very much of interest to me. And with time, I was able to afford to purchase my own equipment, and I started doing my own autism evaluations. Now I'm learning how to network, and I just decided, hey, I'm just going to send an email out, almost like a cold call to a bunch of ABA agencies in my area, letting them know that I accept insurance and I do autism evaluations to see what happens. And it's been growing like leaps and bounds.
That doesn't surprise me. Part of what that, when you tell that, when I'm looking through it in the like business strategy, business building lens, it's so specific and it's so clear for people. Like, here is this thing, and it's something that people are really interested in, like the market. Okay, 50 years ago, it would have been very different, right? And it's something that, without getting into this too deep now, because I want to hear a little bit more about your practice before we dive into some of the patterns, but, something that isn't talked about enough is timing when it comes to business building, and how important it is to just match what you're offering with a certain amount of timing, because you can be too early. You can be too early. And so many people in this work, people who are service providers, often are so passionate about what they do, but sometimes they're seeing out a little far ahead and they don't understand on the business side, you have to match it with real market demand. Like, what are people looking for right now? What are they really aware of right now? And so when you say that, as soon as you said, I started doing this with the autism testing, I was like, I bet that's going great. So it doesn't surprise me that that's been growing so fast. And then I think 50 years ago, it wouldn't have been that way. Not because you would have been doing anything different. It's just the market was so different in what they were looking for. So that's really cool. Yeah, that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So is the main structure of your business model insurance, like typical insurance? Do you do private pay? Like, how does it work?
I accept insurance. Most of my clientele right now is insurance. I have occasionally had a cash paying client, but people tend to focus on wanting to get only cash pay clients and have only cash pay practices. But I think it's not practical. First of all, right now, there's a huge, I would say, flood in the market. Like, there's maybe even a little bit of an oversaturation of therapists in the market, not just psychologists, but also licensed mental health counselors and social workers. So I didn't want to limit myself that way, even though, yes, could I make much more money doing that? Yes. But then, I might have a hard time getting clients, and clients that they like you, they send other clients your way. And sometimes those clients are cash paying clients. So, especially since I'm still starting out, I feel like being open-minded rather than only one set minded when it comes to pay is so limiting.
For sure. And it's again, like looking at it from the business strategy, startup expertise lens, it's wise to do that because often what people miss in building is they'll see their ideal situation and try to get there too quick. So maybe it is ideal to at some point have all cash paying clients. Maybe, right? So people will be like, I'm selling myself short if I don't hold that bar and hold that standard. When really, when it comes to business building, it's not wise, it's not practical, and it's not the most effective way to actually build, air quotes, the business of your dreams. The most practical and effective way is to find where there's demand first, right? Build that momentum, build that strength, become a go-to person in your field, become someone that people are referring to, whatever that looks like. So it often will look a little different than what your kind of dream vision is, but it's what gets that momentum going. Then when you try to go out there and do something that might be on the business side a little bit harder, you have a lot of momentum, right? You aren't like battling the scarcity thing going on, all these things that kind of play against us when we're business building. So, your strategy is super wise because that's actually the more effective way. Even if you're like, maybe someday I'll be all cash paying, the way you're doing it is actually the better way to do it because of exactly what you said. You get clients, they'll refer, but really it's about building your community, your network, people that know you and the quality of the work and are referring people to you and know you as a go-to person for this. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you look ahead to the next 6 to 12 months, what goals do you have for your work and for your practice?
So what I really am trying to build, which is why I'm doing a lot of social media stuff now. For example, I've been on a bunch of podcasts and I continue to apply for podcasts, and I'm trying to get into writing as well. I eventually want to branch a little bit away from traditional psychotherapy and assessment and go into public education and speaking on topics that I'm very, very passionate about. I've always wanted to be a speaker, and I have a lot of expertise in things like neurodiversity and autism, which is probably under the neurodivergence frame, trauma counseling. And these are topics that people, rather than just needing individual therapy on, they need experts who can teach them skills that they can do on their own and motivate them and supply stories of cases that the therapist worked on that were, oh yes, they were stories that stood out, but they also were stories where the patients did really, really well with specific modalities, and they need that. They need the motivation. They need the hope. So that's kind of like public speaking. It seems to be a very popular market now, as it is, especially if you're a therapist and you have expertise in certain areas.
So who is your target market for those talks? Is it people who are in your field? Is it other therapists, or it's more to reach the end user clientele at some point?
I think it's to reach audiences in the general population. I think that there isn't a problem with finding therapists. There's a saturation in the field of therapists. Finding a good therapist, or finding a caring therapist, or finding a therapist who really knows what they're doing in these very, very sensitive topics is another story. And I feel like more than just needing therapy, people need skills, and they need motivation, and they need background information. There's people out there who would love to do, or think that they would love to do trauma work, or work on neurodivergent parenting, or being neurodivergent and being successful, but they don't want to go into traditional therapy. And, if they don't know what therapy is all about and what therapy can offer, they're not going to start. So we need motivational speakers who educate the public on what's available and what's out there, and hear success stories so that they can get themselves motivated just to get started.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, is your goal for adding that public speaking aspect to the work that you do, is it to also bring it in as a pillar of your business model, like paid engagements, or is it more nurturing the community and it's more about, educating the public? Or it is actually like, hey, this is a valid also way that I can supplement income in all of the work that I do?
Well, if I didn't have to work for a living like everybody else and pay bills, I would speak full time. I would love it. I love teaching people. I love motivating people. And I once, many, many years ago, went to a class. It was like a motivational type class. And the teacher said, if you had $8 billion and 8 full hours a day to do nothing, with nothing filled in with your time. How would you fill in your time, knowing that you don't have to worry about money? And then when you are able to know what you would fill your time with in those 8 hours a day, you know what your purpose is in this world. And that's basically that's where all this started. Like, I want to fulfill my purpose. I'm in my late 40s, and it's the stage of life where, like, you want to feel like you're making your mark on the world. And I want to fulfill a purpose in this world. I want to fill the world with something that only I can do and only I can give. And I feel that this direction I'm taking is exactly for that.
What do you think it's going to take, like on the action side, to get there? Do you feel like you're guessing when it comes to how to expand on the entrepreneurship side, the business, or do you feel like you have a good idea of the steps that it's going to take you to get to this vision, this 12-month vision of what you want your practice to look like?
Oh, I definitely don't think I'm guessing. I'm not the type of person to guess, because guessing is going to get you nowhere. The podcasting is great. It's a great experience for me to learn how to become more confident in public speaking. It also obviously gives me more visibility. I also sometimes write articles. Sometimes they get published on blogs. Sometimes they don't. I actually took the step of creating a website for myself with a blog. However, I have not started the blog yet because I've just got too much going on all at once. But I'm supposed to sit with a website developer in the next couple of weeks and get the blog started. And I'm learning to use social media. Social media is amazing because the social media, people that once would never, ever have become visible now can become visible, and they can, reach audiences, and they can motivate through the content that they produce. So I really do feel like I have goals and I have direction in what I'm doing.
What has felt hardest about, let's just like focus on your journey the past couple years once you left more the hospital setting, went more into private practice? What has felt hardest about that transition for you?
I work from home and I don't have small kids. They're all teenagers. But I feel like the work family balance is very, very difficult. I still think we're stuck in the Stone Ages as far as like family understanding that a mom can be a working mom, and there's going to be times she's not available, and she's not going to just be able to just drop her schedule to take you to the mall or to do things with you. It's not that we don't want to be there for our kids, but like the traditional household thing is still something that's not going to go away. And kids want their mother to be available for them. The husband wants the mother to be available. And it's always like, I feel like I'm always walking on a tightrope with trying to get my work done and get my family to understand that, like, I'm there for them, but I also need to have focus for my job and my business if I want to grow. And don't they want me to grow?
Yeah, totally. I get that. I do have small children. I have a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, and we're not done yet growing our family. And I work from home, and there are definitely pros and cons to it, similar to kind of what you said. It's the pros of being here and still being the heart of the home and the family. And, I have to hire someone to come. I work part-time. I'm still the go-to person. And there's absolutely pros and cons of that make working much harder than having a quiet house or just being alone or being in an office somewhere. And it's a very interesting thing, even on the brain front for me. Something that I realize is the higher, for lack of better, more technical terms, the more like higher thinking part of my brain that wants to be activated when I'm working. But the mom brain, that's more survival needs. And, sometimes it feels like my brain is splitting apart when those two things want to be running at the same time. It is the most interesting feeling. I'm sure that you can relate to that.
Absolutely.
It's crazy. It's like it's indescribable. Yeah. When it comes to, you mentioned that you started your practice before fully jumping in. When it came to getting those clients and getting that flow, was there anything that surprised you about getting that part going?
No, I'm married to a physician, which is very helpful because he gave my business card to the practice that he works for, and also some other doctors that specialize in different areas of medicine that he refers out to. And, it's not a small town where I live. It's definitely a big, big place, a busy place, but word does get round. So basically, nothing really surprised me about it because I already kind of had some tools in my basket, if you want to call it, to help me get started. And the only thing is that I was only able to do it part-time because I was working in a hospital, and I would come home from a 9 to 5 job and make dinner and then spend like 2 or 3 hours, 3 to 4 days a week on the computer doing therapy. And I was getting so many clients and I couldn't keep everybody. And my family was also yelling, "You're never available." So, there's, that's what, how it is for a mother and a wife. We're always wrong. We're either doing too little or too much.
So when you went full time into your private practice, did that alleviate a lot of that, for lack of a better term, time poorness? You dropped your 9 to 5. Were you able to work less ultimately?
No. In the beginning, yes, I was still growing my caseload and figuring out what I wanted to do. But as time passed, and because I take insurance and because mental health has been in such demand since COVID, my caseload grew and the amount of work that was coming in grew. And I'm not interested in hiring other people to work for me because that creates a mess of its own. And my family has a very, very difficult time with me not being available at their beck and call. Sometimes I try to work around it. I do my paperwork at night. That's not good because they want me available at night. I try to build it in during the day, but then I get phone calls for potential referrals. So I have to take care of that, or there's laundry that needs to be folded or whatever. So there's just never a perfect balance, really.
Yeah, I mean, this comes up like time and time again when I talk to people in general who are solopreneur service providers. Also on this podcast, this pattern comes up over and over again about wearing all the hats. And something that I find myself saying is, I don't actually know if it's possible. I don't know if it's actually possible to wear all of the hats with, of course, you're layering in motherhood and running a household, which many of us are also balancing. But even just on the business side, um, I think that something's going to have to give sometime in the next decade for sure, because in probably it's coming. We can, run our businesses more sophisticated. Of course, not everyone likes to talk about AI, but something that you said that's really important. Hiring people is a whole different thing. Once you hire people, you become also a manager. So that adds a whole other aspect. So you already have solopreneurship, you're solopreneur service provider. So you're the person that needs to be with clients. You're also running the business. As soon as you hire, you're now all of a sudden having to run a team and you're having to become a manager, which in itself is a completely full-time job. So it's not, like you said, and not everyone is thinking that kind of far ahead. Some people think, oh, if I could just hire someone to do it, it would just make things easier. But often it actually makes things harder. It's not the magic wand that people often think it is. And so I appreciate you bringing that up, because based on how things are, there isn't necessarily a magic fix to that workload problem. Hiring someone also adds a lot to your plate. And there's so many hats to wear as a solopreneur service provider.
Yeah, I already did hire somebody. I have a biller and a credentialer. They're amazing. I didn't want to have to deal with all that stuff. It's hard enough to just write the notes and put in the claims. And there's so many problems that happen with kickbacks from insurance. I get the explanation of benefits in the mail. I have to read through them. Of course, there's always problems where either mistakes were made or I got claims that didn't get paid. So I have to take pictures of it and then text it to them and explain to them and then be on top of them. Did you call? Did you find out? So that already is a managerial role. And if I were to hire like a virtual assistant or a secretary to make my appointments and everything, first of all, I'd be stuck to whatever the schedule they make for me, as opposed to doing it the way I want to do it. And also it would be another group of people that I'm going to have to be on top of. And it's enough being on top of my credentialer and biller who are amazing and responsive. But I have enough hats.
It's hard. It's hard, managing someone. When I had my first son, I had an employee, a full-time employee, and interestingly, that was really stressful for me for some of the reasons that you said. It added this level of pressure that I wasn't expecting. When I had my second son, it was one of the goals of mine to not have any full-time employee, not have someone that was answering directly to me, because there was something obviously to that dynamic that it's not just that it was stressful or that I couldn't do it. It was just the dynamics of running a small team. It's kind of like having a family. It's like being the mom of the family. It's like your attention is needed for every single thing when you're running a small team. Of course, when you're talking bigger businesses, you have bigger teams, one person comes and goes, everything can kind of keep flowing. But when we're talking about running small teams, it's similar to like being the mom in the family that everyone needs the attention from. Like you are the person that gives directives for every single thing. Nothing moves forward without you, even if someone else is doing the carrying out the task. But it's pros and cons. It's a similar thing. It's just kind of like you're not needed less. It's just needed for different things in a way.
There's another aspect to it. You have to have the capital to pay them. And with insurance, right now, I'm not getting money from most of the insurances. They're just holding it back. They're for whatever reason, they keep bouncing back. They try the claims refusing to pay. There's all kinds of glitches. They still have to get paid. My team still needs to get paid regardless. So what happens is if you hire a team and if the money's not coming in, you got to go into debt to pay them. And I'm just not interested in that.
1,000%. Yeah. Thank you for bringing it up because it seems obvious, but it's a huge thing. It's what comes first, the chicken or the egg. You know, you hire someone to help you make more money, but when you're running small teams and you're a solopreneur, like it's not always black and white. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to hire this person. I'm going to make all this more money because like you said, sometimes a month is slower, or in your situation, you might not get however exactly it works, the payments from the insurance companies, and you're having to go under, you're having to go into the red. And again, when you're hiring for small teams, it is a completely different ball game than, of course, bigger business hiring. It's not talked about a lot. People are like, oh, you just hire someone, you know, and it's like when you actually run the numbers and look at the numbers, you have to be really clear about actually how does this pan out? How does this play out? And understanding that often, again, people often think, oh, if I could just hire a VA to do this all, everything would get better. But interestingly, often it doesn't solve a lot of the underlying problems. And it's not as black and white.
Right.
Is there anything else that was more, was harder than you thought it would be when you went, full focus onto your private practice?
I think just being able to get to my niche rather than just surviving. I mean, people think that running a business is about, actualizing their purpose. It is, but in the beginning, or even for a very, very long time, you still have bills to pay. I mean, the mortgage comes, you're not going to have lights if you don't pay the light. Well, you're not going to have heat or air conditioning if you don't pay the heat or air conditioning. So in the beginning, or even for a very long time, or even for a large chunk of time, some of your work isn't going to be about your purpose. It's going to be about doing what you need to do to get a paycheck so that you can pay the bills and be able to gain momentum in your business. And sometimes I've heard people say it took them years and years of doing things they didn't like, and they still do things that they don't like because they had to build their reputation and they had to figure out their direction of their business, and they had to, and the income wasn't necessarily consistent. So
absolutely.
Definitely be purpose driven, but don't think that it's going to actualize your purpose. There's a lot more to go to running a business than just self-actualizing your purpose.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you bringing this up and articulating it the way that you have, because it comes up a lot in kind of like little ways as a pattern. But this is like, just again, you articulated it so well, which is something I find myself saying over and over again on this podcast, is the double-edged sword of finding alignment and finding purpose, which is like, yes, there's an amazing aspect to it. It feels fulfilling to be doing the work. But the whole other side is, if the business isn't working, it's deeply personal. It can be deeply painful. It can kind of burst that bubble of the feeling that is like, wow, I feel so purpose driven. I'm so mission driven. But the reality is the business is real. You still have to run the business and all the things that play into that. And something else that you said that comes up all of the time on here that I'm so glad that you brought up as well, which is this age of social media, the collective conversation around entrepreneurship is that like 20K months in 7 days. You should be able to hit those numbers really quickly, and it's all, DIY, and anyone can do it, and you can grow these big businesses. It is so harmful, that messaging, because you can get there. It takes so much time in building to get to that point. And so for whatever reason that this is like what people think it should happen really quickly. Entrepreneurship is one of the hardest things you could ever do. Somehow, and it's not to scare people off, but we've come too far on the other side of anyone can do it, and you can do it in 7 days, and you should be having 20K months. And it's confusing people and it's harming a lot of people because they think they're doing something wrong. And it's just like, it's inaccurate. It's a myth. That is how business building happens, that in your first year, you're going to see some, maybe, everyone's path is a little different based on where they're starting. But no, hitting those numbers, that's someone that's been doing it. It takes it takes time. Even if you're doing it the right way, it takes time, no matter what. Even if you know exactly how to build, like what I teach people, I show them how to build, going from the startup phase and making sure they're nailing and validating so that they hit a certain point where success and growth is essentially guaranteed. If you know and you're hitting all these things, it takes time. It still takes time, even if you know exactly how to do it. And there's so much collective conversation out there it's harmful.
Yeah. I many, many years ago, I went to a conference in Atlanta, Georgia for my profession. And I was invited to stay in the home of a very, very wealthy family. I don't know how they did it. They somehow ended up making over $100 million a year by opening up a bunch of like electronic stores. So I was sharing with them. I wasn't asking for money. I was just like telling them about my vision about a certain type of businesses I wanted to open. And I'm sure it's going to work out. And they said, I'm sorry to break the bubble, but out of every 100 businesses, usually 70% or more fail. I was like, thank you for pouring cold water on my dreams. But he was being real. He was being real. And this is the truth.
It's more like 90%. It's high. The number is so high. And it's no different for solopreneurs. And that's why I'm here. That's why I do what I do, because I was that person for so long that couldn't get my practice to work and build. I have a business master's. I went to law school. So I'm very business savvy, tech savvy. When I was trying to build my practice for years, I would hire people. I'd do the courses. I'd hire the consultants. I would hire the meta ads person. I would hire all these people that said, if you do this, it's going to work. And it never worked. So that just had me be like, what's missing? Like, I just felt like there was a missing piece. I felt like I was wearing a blindfold. What am I not being told? That's how I ended up doing what I do now, because then I started studying, interestingly, in the tech startup world. I started hearing conversations in that world that I was like, I haven't heard that before. That sounds like something I was missing. So I was like, huh. So I started deep diving there. And that's where I started learning, consuming all of that information and all of those distinctions and understanding the actual mechanics for how to groundedly, because it felt like put a blindfold on, throw a dart 100 yards away. If you hit it, your business is going to be successful. If you don't, it's like the chances of hitting that, it felt so uncertain, and for all of us in this world where there is a mission and there is a purpose piece, I was like, I don't know. It seemed off. And so when I started studying about the startup process, that's why I ended up doing it, because that failure rate is so high. We can change it. You can change it if you understand how to build, but the old way of building a business, it's more like 95% failure rate. And that is no different in our industry. But when I see our industry of people who are, again, the therapists, the practitioners, the coaches, people who are mission driven, we need more of those businesses to be succeeding.
Yeah.
Now more than ever, we need more of those businesses to be succeeding now more than ever. You already mentioned the mental health crisis among all of the other things going on, and the failure rate is still the same. And so that's why, that's my why, that's my mission. That's what my goal is, because data shows in the process that I use for showing people how to build, you can change that failure rate, that success rate that's around 5%. You can change it to about 87% chance of success if you understand the mechanics of business building. But most people aren't talking about that. It's just like every man for himself. And then people are going and, driving themselves right into the startup graveyard.
Yeah.
Last question I'm going to ask you today. If you could wave a magic wand and have one thing solved or fixed for you in your business building, practice building side of what you're doing, what would that be?
Oh, wow. I would probably say the work-life balance. It's just something that no matter how hard I try to do, I think I'm doing a good job of it, but nobody else around me seems to feel that way. And there's nothing I can tell them except that I'm doing the best I can and you got to work with me.
Dr. Shtrambrand, thank you so much for joining me today to have this conversation. And for those of you who are listening, if any part of this resonated, you're in the right place, please reach out. I want to hear from you. And if you want to reach Dr. Shtrambrand directly, the links to her website and to her Facebook page are in the show notes. Thank you again, Dr. Shtrambrand, and to everyone else. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you for the next episode of Ren Behind the Practice.